Hey, what's up guys? I am Brian. This is Tech Therapy. Today's video will be our final video comparison of the LG C2, one of the most well-rounded OLEDs available this year as it goes against last year's amazing Sony A90J Master Series.
I've seen things people wouldn't believe.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the community. Welcome to the family. Please consider liking and subscribing. We are real tech for real people. Today's video is on the LG C2, one of the most well-rounded and best-selling panels of 2022 as it goes against the king of TVs, the Sony A90J Master Series from 2021. Forgive my voice. I don't normally sound like Don Vito Corleone from The Godfather, but I have been under the weather for the last few weeks, so please bear with my voice sounding this way. Anyway, so the comparison of the LG C2 versus the A90J for me is a very important one, as the A90J was the clear winner last year. It was the first OLED to really push the boundaries with a heatsink. It was brighter than OLEDs that had come before it. Master Series are beautiful. They are calibrated in the factory, better sound quality, better build quality, and probably the most popular panel of last year. However, when you look at this comparison with the C2 versus the A90J, which we did at Value Electronics. Special thank you to Value Electronics for supplying both the A90J and the LG C2 for this comparison. We did this video as a live stream with our good friend Stop the FOMO a few months back. I had filmed this on the side. We had done like a 5-hour live stream, and it was actually the G2 versus the A90J. However, last minute, we brought in a C2, put it against the A90J, and we were shocked at how close they really were. All right, guys, here we are looking at the Sony A90J Master Series in the bottom left-hand corner, the LG C2 in the top right. You can tell by the center stand on the LG C2. At this point, the C2 had been released for about 3 weeks, and the G2 had just released. To the left, you can see the screensaver on the G2. You'll see the fireworks pop up here and there. But you can tell from this comparison, using the Spears and Munsell demo disc, how close they actually are. I should do this whole entire narrative in the Godfather voice. Look how they massacred my boy. It's amazing how close they look. You can see that the A90J is a tad brighter in some shots, but they do trade blows where the C2 then looks brighter. We do have them in similar presets. I believe they're both in their cinema. I do change them around during the live stream. You'll see that towards the end of the comparison. As I believe, as you can see FOMO's camera below me, we were changing them for the live stream, like Dolby Vision dark versus bright. Wow, my voice is really bad. Fredo. Santino. Anyway, as we go through, you can see how gorgeous they both look. Now, I had shown the S95B prices as well. LG has had a sale. All panels have gone down a little bit in price, but you saw the price differences between the C2, the G2, last year's A90J, and this year's S95. Now, the S95 being a QD-OLED really shook up the world this year. It's a bit more expensive than the C2. However, the S95 has really driven the prices down on all OLEDs. 80J, 80K, you name it. You can thank the QD-OLED for that. But when FOMO and I did this live stream, we were really expecting the G2 to really blow away the A90J. It did not. It was slightly brighter in some scenes, but it was negligible. Where then you look at the C2, and we're really expecting the C2 to get, mopped, and it didn't either. So the reality is, in critical viewing, without equipment, without calibration, you can't really see a huge difference. Robert, FOMO, and I sat and went back and forth looking at all these panels and really had a hard time seeing which was which. And that is the honest truth of it. As you have people battling in the forums and battling on videos, this destroys that and that destroys this, it simply isn't true. Now, we can take these out of the box and do different settings and have them look completely different, but for the most part, they were pretty easy to get like for like. Both are pretty brand new. Well, the A90J is from last year, obviously, but the C2 and the G2 were brand new. But this A90J was actually just out of the box. It wasn't like it was sitting around in the showroom. So in theory, it was brand new as well, but it was being calibrated. So no calibration done on the A90J, but it was being broken in, but was getting calibrated for a customer. Same with the C2, in fact. But as they go back and forth, you can actually see how close they really are. And again, why I go back to the comparisons of this destroys that, and this isn't even close. And reality is the A90J did measure brighter than the C1 and even the G1 last year in certain presets. And it did have its strengths, having the heatsink. But in reality, the C2 doesn't have a heatsink, and it looks nearly as bright in every scene. And at times does look almost brighter because the C2 looks this way in every preset, where the A90J, to be much brighter, it had to be in a certain preset. Now, I do feel after all is said and done, the C2 and G2 caught up to the A90J, taking nothing away from the A90J. But keep in mind, the A90J is a year older. It hasn't improved because it's an older panel. The C2 and G2 have improved incrementally over the C1 and G1, which puts it right in line with the A90J. Again, keep in mind the A80J was right there with the A90J, 90% of the time. Now, in comparison, the prices, as you saw, the C2 has 42, 48, 55, 65, 77, 83, where the A90J really only it missed a 77-inch. By jumping to 83-inch, it put itself at a disadvantage last year, as the only 77-inch that was offered was actually the A80J. The LG did the exact same thing with the G1, didn't offer it at 83 inches, which I thought was a huge mistake. But now they all have size offerings. However, again, the A90J isn't available in a 77-inch size. But for it to be the same price at 83 inches as the C2 is very compelling, as the build quality on the A90J, the sound, the way it looks, its whole body is much more impressive than the C2. The C2 this year feels less premium. It's much lighter. It is made from different material. The stand is half the weight. Some people love that. Some people don't love it, as it's felt very cheap. So in terms of build quality, the A90J houses it. I mean, the build quality is amazing on the A90J. However, I do feel the C2 is better all around when you take into account for gaming, and will argue that its Dolby Vision implementation is a bit better. Sony has struggled with Dolby Vision implementation. It's fine, but not quite as good as LG. Going into the Samsung S95B, the QD-OLED, which in my opinion beats everything except for the A95K, which is also QD-OLED, you do get rid of Dolby Vision and do have to deal with Samsung's suspect quality control and changing updates which have altered picture quality. But you have to credit the S95B for pushing the envelope and also dropping the price so low that the rest of these companies had to comply and drop their prices as well, which is a pretty interesting master plan by Samsung. But I think we can all agree that they look amazingly close. Here I am on different angles. I am only about 5 feet from these panels. I also had to be off the tripod as it just didn't fit on the platform where I was sitting. Me and FOMO had equipment everywhere, so I tried the best I could to get you the best angles I could. Spears & Muscle, the demo disc is incredible. The calibration disc is incredible, but most of us can't wait for the second disc to come out as we're so tired of looking at the same flowers, cows, and the like. But to say that Sony's color blows away LG's, you can see that's not really the case here. They look slightly different, but ever so slightly. Sony's always had that accuracy, natural look. And you can see that LG has stepped away from the very saturated look of the C8 and the C9, and they changed that with the CX, the C1, and then now C2. To me, if you check the specular highlights, you can see how close they really are here. For me, LG was always the Samsung of OLEDs. They had a very saturated, poppy look. And I don't know if that was due to burn-in issues with the C8 and even the C9. They definitely changed the image on the CX, C1, and C2. Many feel that the C2 and G2 have taken the leash off and gotten closer to the C9 and C8 brightness. That perhaps was a detriment to the panel's health. We've also learned in between last year and this year that the heatsink isn't really there to make the panels brighter, but simply to protect them. You can see in this shot, things look a little bit different. It's a little bluer on the LG. But we've kind of found that the heatsink wasn't necessarily there to really have the panel be much brighter, more or less to protect it. We've seen that with the A90J QD-OLED not really being brighter than the S95B. Now the S95B was much brighter, had been brought down a bit. I feel that wasn't to nuke the panel or cripple it, simply to protect it. But I don't love changing picture quality with updates. But when it comes to LG versus any of the other manufacturers, keep in mind LG's been doing this the longest in terms of being tried and true. I mean, Sony developed the first LG or the first OLED many, many years ago in the 90s. However, LG's been manufacturing these consistently. Tried and true, they just get better and better and better at it. That's what I would say with them. Where with Samsung, as much as I love the S95B, there's been a lot of build quality questions. How long will the panels last? And again, changing things with updates, which has really hurt the trust of that manufacturer. Sony, there is a certain signature, a certain adherence to shadow detail and, you know, the filmmaker's intent, which I don't care much for, but you can see how close they actually look. I personally feel you can do whatever you want with your panels, make them look as saturated or as lively as you like. But FOMO and I were both shocked at how similar these panels looked. We were really kind of drinking the Kool-Aid of both the A90J and the G2, and in the end, the C2 slides in as the best overall value. Now, with its current price drops, it is a much better value now than it's ever been, and probably the most highly recommended of any of the other OLEDs. Again, tried and true, very well-rounded, a lot of functionality, more HDMI 2.1 inputs. We now have many gaming options and a lot of ways to customize the image. But this time of year, guys, what are you thinking? What are you considering? Is the C2 something that you are thinking of? How do you think it does against last year's amazing A90J? A90J, much like the A9G, one of the best panels ever made. Absolutely love this panel. But the Master Series does risk taking these 2-year breaks and letting the competition catch up. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this comparison. I will talk to you soon. Love you guys. Take care.